recently I had to block someone on Facebook that I've been friends with for 13, 14 years, something like that. This is not the first time that I've personally had to deal with people who have delusions, and I guess it probably won't be the last time, but it did prompt me to think about making this video. So if you are in the middle of trying to deal with a family member or a friend or a partner who is struggling with delusions or perhaps psychosis or paranoia in some way, shape or form, or intrusive thoughts, then I feel where you're coming from. By the way, welcome, my name is Louisa. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and if you're coming back, welcome back. I am a psychology student. I have my bachelor's degree and I am currently working on my postgraduate. I am also a Christian, so if you're interested in theology and psychology, then this channel is hopefully for you. Yeah, paranoid delusions, gotta love it. Just to give you a brief overview of what delusional disorder is, because that's mostly what we're going to be talking about, there is an article from the Cleveland Clinic that I'll quote. Delusional disorder is a type of mental health condition in which a person can't tell what's real from what's imagined. There are many types, including persecutory, jealous, and grandiose types. It's treatable with psychotherapy and medication. Delusional disorder is a type of psychotic disorder. Its main symptom is the presence of one or more delusions. A delusion is an unshakable belief in something that is untrue. The belief isn't a part of the person's culture or subculture, and almost everyone else knows this belief to be false. People with delusional disorder often experience non-bizarre delusions. Non-bizarre delusions involve situations that could possibly occur in real life, such as being followed, deceived, or loved from a distance. These delusions usually involve the misinterpretation of perceptions or experiences. In reality, these situations are either untrue or are highly exaggerated. Non-bizarre delusions are different from bizarre delusions, which include beliefs that are impossible in our reality, such as believing someone has removed an organ from your body without any physical evidence of the procedure. People with delusional disorder often continue to socialize and function well, apart from the subject of their delusion. Generally, they don't behave in an odd or unusual manner. This is unlike people with other psychotic disorders who might also have delusions as a symptom. In some cases, however, people with delusional disorder might become so preoccupied with their delusions that their lives are disrupted. So what are the types of delusional disorder? There are different types of delusional disorder which are determined based on the main theme of the delusions the person experiences. The types of delusional disorder include erotomanic. People with this type of delusional disorder believe that another person, often someone important or famous, is in love with them. They may attempt to contact the person of the delusion and engage in stalking behavior. Grandiose. People with this type of delusional disorder have an overinflated sense of self-worth, power, knowledge, or identity. They may believe they have a great talent or have made an important discovery. Jealous. People with this type of delusional disorder believe that their spouse or sexual partner is unfaithful without any concrete evidence. Persecutory. People with this type of delusional disorder believe someone or something is mistreating, spying on, or attempting to harm them or someone close to them. People with this type of delusional disorder may make repeated complaints to legal authorities. So we're going to expand on this shortly. I have personal experience with the jealous delusions and also the persecutory delusions, but also my mother, who was a narcissist, also had very grandiose delusions where she imagined that authority figures such as the police were communicating with her in secret with codes of vehicles on the road. So yeah, I have a lot of experience with delusional people. Unfortunately, I grew up with one. Another type of delusion is somatic. People with this type of delusional disorder believe that they have a physical issue or medical problem, such as a parasite or a bad odor. And the last one is mixed. People with this type of delusional disorder have 2 or more of the types of delusions listed above. So what's the difference between delusional disorder and schizophrenia? Because they are technically both psychotic disorders. And essentially it comes down to delusional disorder not really having any other symptoms other than the delusion. So they don't have the same issues as speech patterns and problems with emotional expression, which is known as flat affect. So the behaviour that you see in schizophrenia is not the same as you would see in delusional disorder, even though they do share a lot of common features. People with delusional disorder are often a lot more functional than people with schizophrenia. However, it doesn't mean that they always stay very functional. There can be very serious issues with it as well. So who is affected by delusional disorder? Well, according to the Cleveland Clinic, delusional disorder most often occurs in middle to late life, with the average age of onset being 40 years. The persecutory and jealous types of delusional disorder are more common in people assigned male at birth, and the erotomanic type is more common in people assigned female at birth. People who tend to be socially isolated are more likely to develop delusional disorder. These populations include immigrants with language barriers, people who are deaf, people who are visually impaired, and the elderly. Although delusions might be a symptom of more common disorders such as schizophrenia, delusional disorder itself is rather rare. Approximately 0.05% to 0.1% of the adult population has delusional disorder, which if you think about it is still quite a few people. The most common type of delusional disorder is the persecutory type, when someone believes others are out to harm them despite evidence to the contrary. So what are the signs and symptoms that you need to look out for with delusional disorder? The presence of delusions is the most obvious sign of delusional disorder, which vary based on the type. Another characteristic of this condition is that the person often lacks self-awareness that their delusions are problematic. They're unable to accept that their delusions are irrational or inaccurate, even if they recognize that other people would describe their delusions this way. Anger and violent behavior may be present if someone is experiencing persecutory, jealous, or erotomanic delusions. People with delusional disorder may also develop anxiety and/or depression as a result of the delusions. Early symptoms of delusional disorder may include feelings of being exploited, preoccupation with the loyalty or trustworthiness of friends, a tendency to read threatening meanings into benign remarks or events, persistently holding grudges, a readiness to respond and react to perceived slights. So essentially they have a very hostile view of other people and interpersonal interactions and relationships. They don't trust very many people. They are quite antagonistic in many respects, and they're always prepared for someone to wrong them in some way. Like they're expecting it. They don't operate from a place of trust, they operate from a place of hostility and suspicion of others. So what causes delusional disorder? As with many other psychotic disorders, researchers don't yet know the exact cause of delusional disorder. Researchers are, however, looking at the role of various factors that may contribute to the development of the condition, including genetic factors, biological factors, environmental and psychological factors. And when it comes to environmental factors, evidence suggests that delusional disorder can be triggered by stress. Alcohol use disorder and substance use disorder might contribute to the condition. Hypersensitivity and ego defense mechanisms like reaction formation, projection, and denial are some psychodynamic theories for the development of delusional disorder. Social isolation, envy, distrust, suspicion, and low self-esteem are also some psychological factors that may lead to a person seeking an explanation for these feelings and thus forming a delusion as a solution. So for some people, they will experience uncomfortable emotions such as feeling shame and feeling unworthy and feeling anxious about a relationship. And rather than saying, okay, this is a problem within me that I have from past experiences, Rather than attributing their feelings to that, instead they look externally for people to blame. So they're feeling something as a result of their own personal issues. And the closest person to them, they're like, well, it must be your fault. You're here, therefore you are causing me to feel this way, even though this is something that I experience regardless of whether you are in my life or not. So how is the disorder diagnosed? Healthcare providers, mainly mental health professionals, diagnose delusional disorder when a person has one or more delusions for 1 month or more that can't be explained by any other condition. The person must also not have the characteristic symptoms of other psychotic disorders, such as schizophrenia. If someone is experiencing signs and symptoms of delusional disorder, a healthcare provider will perform a complete medical history and physical examination. Although there aren't any laboratory tests to diagnose delusional disorder, their healthcare provider might use various diagnostic tests, such as imaging tests, a urine drug screen, and blood tests, to rule out any physical conditions, medications, or substances that could be causing the symptoms. At this point in time, it's basically a process of ruling out other things. So rather than having a diagnostic tool that is specifically used to diagnose delusional disorder, because it's so uncommon for this to occur on its own without something like schizophrenia. So instead they are having to rule out things like schizophrenia, ruling out drug influences and other substances. And then if they have exhausted all of the possibilities, then they're like, well, the only thing left is delusional disorder. If their healthcare provider finds no physical reason for the symptoms, a consultation with a psychiatrist or psychologist will likely be made. Psychiatrists and psychologists use specially designed interview and assessment tools to evaluate a person for a psychotic disorder. They'll ask questions about the delusions and assess the person's mental status. The psychiatrist or psychologist may also interview family members and friends so they can provide further details about the person's delusions and a timeline of the symptoms. As other mental health conditions can cause delusions, mental health professionals carefully assess the person for other symptoms. Delusional disorder can be misdiagnosed as any of the following conditions: obsessive-compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, delirium/major neurocognitive disorder, bipolar disorder, personality disorders, especially borderline and paranoid personality disorder. So this is a pretty important point to make. The individual that I knew who had jealous delusions actually also had OCD. And he knew he had OCD, but he refused to get treatment. And so instead of actually getting treatment for the OCD and the delusions, instead he just kind of bounced from one relationship to the next and essentially blamed anyone that he was in a relationship with as being the problem. Like, clearly she was a hoe if he was feeling jealous. It must be that she was actually stepping out on him and things like that. So he would do stuff like bombarding someone that he was dating with text messages at 2 o'clock in the morning because he had been stalking their Facebook profile all night trying to figure out who they were cheating with. And he would go as far as to accuse them of having relationships with family members and pets. And so, as you can imagine, his relationships did not last very long. And it's like, dude, do you want to be alone for the rest of your life? Because that is essentially the consequence of these actions. So he may have been functional at work and things like that, but he definitely wasn't functional in his personal home life. The thing with any mental health condition is that the person has to be willing to actually get treatment, and they have to be willing to comply with treatment as well. So if it involves medication, or if it involves regular counseling sessions or family therapy, or working on things in their own time personally, They have to be willing to do that, and if they're not willing to do that, then they just continue to suffer. And unfortunately, with things like delusions, they usually involve other people. So it's not just the person who has the delusions who suffers, it's everyone around them who they start accusing of things that are completely irrational. So how is delusional disorder treated? Treatment for delusional disorder most often includes psychotherapy or talk therapy and medication, but delusional disorder is highly resistant to treatment with medication alone. People with delusional disorder often don't seek treatment for the condition on their own because most people with delusional disorder don't realize their delusions are problematic or incorrect. It's more likely they'll seek help due to other medical health conditions such as depression or anxiety. People with severe symptoms or who are at risk of hurting themselves or others might need to be admitted to the hospital until the condition is stabilized. Psychotherapy is a term for a variety of treatment techniques that aim to help people identify and change troubling emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. Working with a mental health professional such as a psychologist or psychiatrist can provide support, education, and guidance to the person and their family. Through therapy, people with delusional disorder can learn to manage their symptoms, identify early warning signs of relapse, and develop relapse prevention plans. Types of psychotherapy include individual psychotherapy. This type of therapy can help a person recognize and correct the underlying thinking that has become distorted. And cognitive behavioral therapy. This is a structured, goal-oriented type of therapy. A mental health professional helps people take a close look at their thoughts and emotions. They'll come to understand how their thoughts affect their actions. Through CBT, they can unlearn negative thoughts and behaviors and learn to adopt healthier thinking patterns and habits. And there's also family-focused therapy. This therapy can help people with delusional disorder and their families. This treatment involves psychoeducation regarding delusional disorder, communication improvement training, and problem-solving skills training. Because delusions are a symptom of psychosis, antipsychotic drugs are usually prescribed in the treatment process. Other medications which someone might be prescribed include anti-anxiety medications, which help to reduce the anxious feelings that the person has, which prompt the delusions to explain the anxiety. So these are the sort of mainstream, well-documented and accepted methods for treating this disorder, but there is new research coming out of the UK on a type of therapy which does actually specifically help delusional disorder. This is an article from Oxford Research which says, "Feeling safe works. Effective treatment for paranoia follows a decade of Oxford research." Professor Daniel Freeman, clinical psychologist, explains how delusions may be unfounded, but they cause real distress and misery for sufferers who feel constantly unsafe. He set himself the challenge of finding an effective treatment. A decade later, he and colleagues have unveiled Feeling Safe, which shows real benefits for trial participants, and he hopes a step change in the treatment of severe paranoia. This is an infographic of the trial, and you can pause it and have a read for yourself. But essentially, over the 10 years of their research, and they included participants ages between 17 and 71 with 130 people, they found that half of the people in the trial experienced the elimination of persecutory delusions. As Professor Freeman wrote, "The results have been as good as I had dared to imagine all those years back. Half of patients at the end of treatment no longer had a persecutory delusion. A further quarter experienced moderate benefit, and those gains largely remained at follow-up. Feeling Safe did not only tackle paranoia, it also brought an improvement in patients' general psychological well-being. Crucially, the treatment was very popular. Almost everyone stayed the course. Feeling Safe showed large benefits compared to the alternative and often effective psychological treatment. The type of therapy we provide to patients really does matter." So one of the things that researchers identified about delusional disorder, especially things like persecutory delusions and jealous delusions, is that it often stems from the person feeling unsafe in some way. So, for example, with persecutory delusions, the person does not feel safe in their own home. They don't feel safe with friends and family. They think that healthcare providers might be out to get them. And so the program specifically targets those thoughts and feelings. It attempts to help the person to feel safe in their environment, to actually reclaim the feeling of safety in their own home and things like that. So especially if it comes from an experience where they did actually have a feeling of being unsafe and the delusions have kind of stemmed from that experience, then it can be a way to help them to resolve that trauma. So what happened with my friend that prompted me to actually end up blocking her on Facebook? Well, I had noticed for some time, probably about a year or so, that her posts on Facebook were becoming less and less coherent. And the thing is, I had moved interstate pretty much like 5 years ago. So the last time I saw her would have been possibly 2018. She lives in Queensland and I live in Tasmania. So there's like 4 states away from each other. There are 2 states between us and then our own separate states. So if you have to travel, first of all, to leave Tasmania, you either have to fly or take a ship, because of course Tasmania is an island. So I can't get off the island unless I take some kind of public transport, which requires documentation. So being that far away, I couldn't personally check up on her or ask how she was really doing, because we live completely different lives now. And the last conversation that I had with her on the phone would have been probably like 2020 or maybe 2021, something like that. So I think it's fair to say that I had not really been that invested in the friendship, because it was very one-sided. It was all about having sympathy for her. So even though I sympathized, I didn't necessarily want to have a lot of contact with this friend. And I think we will call her Sophia. So over the last year or so, Sophia's posts on Facebook became increasingly incoherent. And this is where, like, I'm not really sure if there are other conditions at play, whether there are substances involved, because again, I'm not close to the situation, I'm not present, so I'm mostly seeing this from afar. There could be substances involved, there could be other mental health conditions such as schizophrenia or perhaps bipolar, because the way that she would write was almost indecipherable. Like, she's an intelligent person, she is an educated person, she spent most of her career educating other people. That was what she did for a job, and I don't really know what she does for a job now. So it's hard for me to say how that aspect of her life is going. But she would often use like the wrong word or misspell things or have very poor grammar and punctuation, and that was uncharacteristic, as far as I could tell, of her usual manner of writing and speaking. So not that long ago, she had a post on Facebook which was a series of photos of the police essentially at her house, and I did recognize that it was her house. So this isn't like someone who has hacked her account and they're pretending to be Sophia and she's now acting out because it's actually someone else. That's not what's going on, because there were photos of her house. And in the photos, the police are all over the place. They're processing it like a crime scene. And she said in the post, and I don't have screenshots of this so I can't quote it directly, but she was saying that it had taken a very long time for the police to take her seriously and to come and investigate. And I thought that was strange, because if what she was claiming was true, and she was claiming that there was someone who had been her cleaner who was breaking into her house to essentially run a meth lab in her house. And I thought, like, I mean, if that's true, then why are they not investigating sooner? Why has it been so difficult for her to get help? So as it mentioned in the article that I quoted, this is actually very common with persecutory delusions, is that the person contacts the authorities a lot. So they contact the police a lot and make a lot of different allegations about people which are unfounded. And I mean, this could potentially get them into a lot of trouble because they could be charged with wasting police resources and things like that, and making frivolous statements. But the recent post that I did get screenshots of, and which I do want to talk about, was basically about lending someone her car and them not giving it back. So Sophia says, well, never lend anyone your car as they can legally steal it, then become a civil matter. Goodbye, so that's misspelt, car, even though the cops know it's yours as you provide all details. I'm so pissed off. It's looking this way, still have to do one more interview with the people involved. Let's hope there is some documentation that's dodgy. If not, I won't get my car back. So this is sort of her writing style now. And it's still mostly coherent, but it's a little bit difficult. So at the time that I read this post, I kind of took it at face value. Like, I had not been in the vicinity for quite some time, so it was hard for me to tell whether or not the things that she was posting were real. And I guess I was sympathetic and I wanted to be helpful in some way, which if you have seen my content before, I think I've pretty much said that it is never a good idea to try and help anyone. Like, if you offer advice to people, they are just gonna turn around and bite your head off. So don't give anyone any advice, ever. But in this situation, I ignored my own previous advice and I went ahead and offered a suggestion, because I had in the past actually lent a car to someone at work and she had crashed it, and I had been called by the police because she gave false information, and it was this whole big nightmare kerfuffle thing, and I ended up taking the car back. But I did that with my spare key. So what I said to Sophia was, do you have a spare set of keys and know where the car will be? I repossessed a car that a colleague was using after she crashed into someone and gave them false information without telling me. I found out from the police when the other party reported the number plate. She tried to get me arrested for stealing my own car. So I'm pretty sure I have told her this story before, but even so, like, I didn't think that what I wrote was that incoherent or difficult to understand. And I thought that if she was able to use logic, first of all, she knows that I live in Tasmania. Like, she knows that. But this was the response. No, I don't know where my car is, but clearly you do. Where are you at? Call me on this number. Please call me on this number. Please tell me the VIN number. Can you call me or text? So for some reason, she decided that I knew where her car was and that I had the VIN number of her car and that I needed to call her. So it's 11 o'clock at night and she rings like 5 times. And so it's late at night, I'm asleep, I'm not answering calls from a random friend that I haven't spoken to in like 3 years. It's not gonna happen. Like, if she needs help, I can't help. And if it's like, why would she be calling me? I had no idea. So she woke me up and I just put my phone onto do not disturb and went back to sleep. And then apparently she rang like another 4 times. after that, so I'm glad that I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. But anyway, when I woke up the next morning, I found all of the Facebook replies, which I hadn't seen because they were done late at night. So then my response was this: what are you talking about? The VIN of my old Toyota Corona that I took to the wreckers in 2005? Why do you need that? Why did you ring at almost 11 p.m. last night? So that was the reply that I left, and then a little while later I was like, okay, I'm gonna be out all day because I'm going to a charity event and I don't want to have to deal with this. So at the time I just blocked her, and then afterwards I thought, I'm not gonna unblock her because that's completely irrational. Like, why would a person even assume that someone who lives on the opposite side of the country has their car or knows where their car is? Like, did you get that impression from what I wrote? So at that point, I kind of realized that I was not dealing with someone who was in a rational mind space, that she was not really able to think logically about anything. This was a very emotional, reactive kind of response. And like I said, I have unfortunately dealt with that in my personal life quite a bit in the past, and I really do not want to have to deal with it in the future. And I'm just too far away to be of any use, really. The most I could potentially do is call the police in her area and ask for like a welfare check and maybe give them my 2 cents worth on what I think is going on. But I could be wrong. She could be going down the path of like drug use or something, and in which case, like, it's really up to her if she wants to get sober and get clean. But if you are dealing with someone in your own household who has paranoid delusions of some sort, such as persecutory delusions or jealous delusions, then you really do need to get professional help, because in some instances, like it said in the article, they have to be hospitalized for their own safety and for your safety. At no point are you going to be able to break through the delusion by attempting to reason with them. You're not going to be able to present them with any amount of facts and documented evidence that will change their mind. They will not accept that their delusion is not true. So now I'm wondering if any of the things that she posted in more recent times about like her house being broken into or her car being stolen, if any of this is true, or if this is all stuff that she has imagined and just believes it. When it comes to persecutory delusions, sometimes there is some truth, and then they take that small amount of truth and they exaggerate it into something which really just has not happened. So in this case, perhaps she did lend her car to someone and they haven't brought it back, but then because I had a helpful suggestion, she's like latched onto that and decided that I must be part of the conspiracy against her and I'm somehow involved in the theft of her car. And that is one of the biggest risks with dealing with someone who has persecutory delusions, is that they can decide that you are one of their enemies. So there's a really awesome PDF worksheet from Queensland Health, which I will link in the description box if you want to check it out. And links to the articles should all be in the description box if you want to read it for yourself. But essentially these are tips and tricks for caring for a person who has delusions, and it's specifically written for healthcare professionals such as nursing staff. But I think there's some helpful advice here for family members and other people who have to deal with someone who has delusions. So in the article, it defines what delusions are. And it says, delusions are false fixed beliefs that are out of touch with reality. They are beliefs that are not shared within the person's culture or religion. For example, believing that you are possessed by a spirit is an accepted and respected state if you believe in voodooism or Pentecostalism. However, in other social circumstances, such a belief would be viewed as a delusion. It is a delusion if you believe that you are, for example, captain of the Australian hockey team, when in fact you are not. Delusions are held with total conviction and cannot be altered by the presentation of facts or by appeal to logic or reason. They may be understood as attempts to make sense of abnormal internal experiences, such as hallucinations or feelings of anxiety or distress. Around 3 in 100 people will experience psychosis, which is losing touch with reality through hallucinations, delusions, or disorganized thoughts at some point in their lives. So I thought that was a pretty good working definition of delusions in general, and the fact that they are fixed beliefs that cannot be altered by the presentation of facts or the application of logic or reason. You won't be able to convince someone to let go of a delusional belief, no matter how hard you try. So some of the advice that they had in this article for how to deal with delusional people is to not necessarily argue with them about the delusion, but to sort of express sympathy and empathy for the way that they feel about the delusion. So if they're feeling stressed and anxious, then affirming that, or confirming some things which were true, such as, yes, I saw a man standing over there, but no, he wasn't talking about you. So you don't want to affirm any of the delusions, but you also don't want to necessarily argue about the delusions. So it's trying to get this fine balance between not encouraging it, but also not trying to alienate the person at the same time. However, that becomes particularly difficult if you are the object of their delusion. There's not really a lot you can do except to get distance from that. So if you are the object of someone's delusion, then please make sure that you seek help and assistance with that, because you need people between you and that person. So for example, the erotomania, that famous celebrity should not have to deal with that person. Instead, there should be security and police involved. If you are dealing with someone who has delusions of jealousy, who is paranoid and who cannot be reasoned with and no amount of evidence is sufficient, then you should not stay in that relationship. That is actually a very dangerous place to be, because that person can become violent. And the accusations of infidelity will absolutely crush you mentally and emotionally over time. So whatever you do in this situation, don't compromise your own safety and your own well-being to help someone who is in this state, because first of all, you won't help them, and second of all, you could actually endanger your own life. You need to involve the professionals. They need to get proper help. They often need to be medicated because it is a form of psychosis. And if they get the right treatment, then it is at the very least manageable, if not curable. So it's all about making sure that they are put into the right place with the right people to get the treatment that they need. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully that was helpful and informative. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you have any insight into what I have seen lately, or if you have your own experiences. I would be very interested to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone who you think it might help. And I will see you next time. Bye.